So Geppetto's seen a lot of tweaks. So his trait, he drops dummies. The dummies have base attacks. You can have up to 3 until you get large family. He's a little bit interesting. He's really a ranged character masquerading as a melee character. You really don't want to get close most of the time with Geppetto, unless you happen to be a connoisseur who enjoys things like rocket science. He's somewhat divisive in the community, I've noticed. Some people really don't like him, but he's a fun kind of turret style character. The only one we have in the game. Very creative, very unique. One thing that was holding him back for a long time is that dummies didn't share a lot of his attributes. So it was hard to scale their damage, but I could be wrong. My understanding is that they now share crit chance and attack, global damage.
Yeah, they share crit damage, crit chance, global damage, and they share like Ace of Spades benefit off of that.
Ace of Spades, that's a big one. And that works with Black Lotus as well, which is very strong. That's a very strong thing for his kit. He has a very safe playstyle. He's another one that can be more consistent than a lot of characters. He can be hard to get running initially, but that's something I think that comes with experience. You sit with him a little bit, you have different experiences with him. He's very strong, and he has a lot of variety because you can go into a more of a power-centric build. You can go into Cogsplosion and just spam it to keep up your dummies. I'm honestly surprised sometimes by the amount of damage we see off of abilities like Sharp Noses or Lightning Rod dummies. It feels like his dummies can melt bosses in a way that doesn't totally make sense to me yet.
Geppetto, in my mind, is the character with the most replayability on different builds. You look at rocket science, that kind of leaves the rest of his kit behind. Like, it doesn't really do anything for it, but it is a way to play. It's a way to play a dash build, and you can have all these dummies up. The way to play rocket science, in my mind, is make your dummies do the most they can. So you're taking things like Sharp Noses, Pogo Hoppers, Heart Ties to keep them alive, and just let them do their own thing as you dash around. Dummy Ball is the best talent that he has because he also has twin dummies to spawn 2 dummies at once, but that is dependent on your trait cooldown, and that's also this is a talent that you want at Legendary. You really want the 100% on that. Dummy Ball is a guaranteed dummy every single time. You can take special charges and special cooldown and get, if you have large family, which gives you another dummy and trait cooldown, you can get 4 dummies out quicker than you can with twin dummies. Unstable Cores is a completely different play style of really focusing on your dummy and managing your dummy's placements. I think within his builds, he has, in my mind, like 4 ways to play. You have the magnetic hammer and flux capacitor style where you're using power and you're affecting all your dummies at once. He has the defense build where you're focusing on laser lenses, lightning rod dummies, and forked lightning, and a bunch of defense cooldown. And then he has 2 different attack builds. He has the one where you're hitting the dummies with oiled mechanisms and probably Sharp Noses and family meeting. And then he has the one where you take fireworks and clockwork medicine, and what he was saying, just get a bunch of special charges, spam these on your dummies, have a bunch of mermaid tears, and now you're just shooting fireworks out all over the place. There's like so many different styles in his kit. Of most starting talents, he has a lot of different ways to play these, and I think he's one of the most fun characters to play, albeit one of the slowest characters to get started, and you'll probably feel like you're falling behind with most of his builds.
I think the one thing that's tricky is that some characters, when you're practicing them, you play for like 5 minutes and then you die and then you reset. And so you get to learn the character and the kit in the early phases of the game really well. Geppetto's interesting because he can actually get a lot farther earlier on. If you have a base understanding of his kit, you will get farther than you would with another character, but that adds to the fatigue of learning him. So I think that's part of the reason why some people don't stick with him and don't like love him, is because in the early phases of the game, you might get farther than you would with another character, and you don't necessarily get that easy 5-minute reset that you would. It's one of those places where that being a little bit better actually makes the learning curve feel a little bit more austere. I felt that a lot with Distant Explosions when I was learning Scarlet, because Distant Explosions will let you continue to go beyond what you really have the power to scale into. And so it can be a punishing process. One other thing that I think really deserves some discussion about, just in his base talents before we get to ultimates, you look at Flash of Genius. So instantly create 1 magical object per talent rarity. So if you upgrade this, you will get more, and the rarity of them goes up as rarity goes up. Although I think the first one sometimes is a legendary. So there's a little bit of interesting things going on there. This talent is so much fun. It's kind of like Master Thief. It doesn't go quite as crazy as Master Thief, but it is really exciting to suddenly just have this pile of items. And now that we have a Sands of Oblivion in the game, once you have the value out of it that you want, you can rotate out of it. So there are a lot of talents in the game, I think, that Sands of Oblivion enables, because when you are locked into these talents, when you're checking them out, you can use them to get like a short-term advantage, but then you're not stuck with them in the later phases of the game where they fall off. And Flash of Genius is a massive beneficiary of this.
Flash of Genius is going to be my gambling fix whenever I come to terms and ban myself from Master Thief. I was playing a game with this offline with Tim and someone else, and I had Flash of Genius at Epic, my level 2 talent, give me Hope Diamond, Vorpal Blade, and Philosopher's Stone. And I'm like, this is the most value I could ever get from a single talent in the game. Flash of Genius can be insane, or it can just be like, hey, here's some green armor, which is also still good. You know, if you're able to stack like 2 green armor from Flash of Genius or something, you're likely going to finish it in your run. Also, you can reroll it, and you have a reroll chance to get a legendary or curse, and it stacks with Tommy Tobacco. So if you have Flash of Genius and it is common, potentially go try to finish side quests or whatever and get Tommy Tobacco and then come back and upgrade it.
But don't, whatever you do, if you picked it and then you use Sands of Oblivion to get out of it, don't pick it again, because the second time you won't get any items from it. They do care a little bit about breaking this one, and so that's how they keep it under control. So once you've rolled away from it, don't try to roll back into it, because then you'll just have a talent that doesn't do anything for you. And it'll probably be a legendary talent too, which is really sad. You just have a legendary talent that does nothing on your second run. Going beyond Flash of Genius, you have Mecha Puppet and Overclock. I'd say that I lean towards Mecha Puppet these days, not strictly because it's better, but because it's a lot easier to get out. The thing with Overclock is you really want to have all your dummies up before you pop it. And there's some times where the camp just kills stuff too fast for you to get all of your puppets out at the same time. Mecha Puppet, I feel like, is a little bit easier to squeeze out, but Overclock, I think, has a higher ceiling.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of the opposite way right now, and that's because of challenge runs with Berserker foes. Mecha Puppet can get obliterated right away, which is unfortunate because Mecha Puppet is really good. Mecha Puppet is also really good with the ultimate ring, getting 2 ultimates. Having 2 of these guys out, having large family, having them all have sharp noses, this is some of the most insane boss melts you'll see. Having bomb reserves on both of those Mecha Puppets as well is insane. I haven't really played around too much with Master Puppet. I want to do a video and try to focus that and see how much damage I can just have a single Master Puppet. That's where the Mecha Puppet will absorb all the dummies that are built around it to gain more health and damage. That seems fun, especially if you do have a bunch of special charges and dummy ball so that you can get a bunch of dummies out, do that real quickly, and then try to get more out to assist it. Overclock, again, I kind of mentioned when we were on Snow Queen, is when you use Overclock, the cooldown for the ultimate starts right away. So a lot of times if you're using this right as you go into a camp, it's going to be close to finished on cooldown by the time you get into the next camp. High voltage is after a dummy is placed or displaced by power, it activates the overclock effect. This is a way to kind of get around dummies dying in challenge runs or just in nightmare runs, especially if you have something like magnetic hammers and flux capacitor where you could pull all 4 of them, hit them, and let them all do an ultimate spin. They're intangible during that, so they can't die, which is pretty cool. Hyperclock is the one where your dummies apply ignite and explode at the end. It does a good amount of damage. I wish this was their chance to do something with rocket science and say like ignited enemies take more damage or something while hyperclock is active. I wish they did something like that, but I like that they added a flare of ignite even though it doesn't synergize.
Ace has talked a little bit about this before. There's an interesting thing in a couple characters' kits, kind of like Evisceration with Scarlet. It's like, why do we have this bleed here? What else does it do for the character? And ignites that for Geppetto. It'd be cool to see that tied to something around his design that makes it feel like it ties into what his identity is a little bit better. I have to say, High Voltage is so good. It's super, super good. Really like that one. I've tried that one out. Magnetic Hammer, it's such an interesting one. I think that that's one of the higher skill choices. You can kind of mitigate damage a lot, right? You can pull your puppets around and place them so that they're not getting blown up. So I feel like Magnetic Hammer, having good angles and understanding where you can put the puppets to mitigate damage and manage them. Magnetic Hammer is a really cool one, and there's a lot of skill expression and understanding how to maximize its impact.
Yeah, Magnetic Hammer kind of ruined Geppetto for me because whenever I don't have it, I forget, and I'm like, oh, why don't I have this? This feels like it should be based in the kit. The one that feels like that for me is Vacuum Capsule, where dummies hit by special are jerked to the center of the explosion, because that comboed with Magnetic Hammer is so fun. How I like to do it is you throw the special so that it's about to blow up, then place your dummy. Vacuum capsule will pull the dummy across you and hit an enemy. The enemy turns around and hit the dummy. You use magnetic hammer to pull them back, hit them again, then throw a special again in front of you, and just it's basically ping pong. It's the ping pong build. I really, really like that. One of the saddest things to me is, and again, I said a lot of the final talents like Evisceration are really disappointing. They put explosive builds into the game, where when built by trait, dummies emit a blast dealing 40 area damage. This is not a lot of damage. I mean, you can take it on any build. Its main synergy is with twin dummies, where, yeah, it's okay damage, but this could have been something. This was their chance to add a level of ignite. Just do something where dummies can be ignited, they can do more damage against ignited enemies, do something with a special and cog explosion that adds some level of ignite. And I'm sad that that was a missed opportunity.
It's interesting to look at nailing strike and oiled mechanisms. So dummies hit by Geppetto's attack in his oiled mechanisms immediately attack in their current position, dealing 50% damage. But that's actually dummy damage. It doesn't scale off of nailing strike. I think these are funny. These are more funny, I think, than fun. I'd say that both of them actually do kind of okay in the earlier stages of the game, but they get really hard in Chapter 2 and Chapter 3. And I just don't know how on earth you can make these work if you were going into fight Baba Yaga. I just don't see a situation where that you can get a nailing strike off to any degree of effectiveness. Like, that would be such a long fight because you're just basically waiting for her to stand in the center and laugh so you can actually hit her.
Yeah, Baba Yaga does kind of make those tough. There's still an argument for nailing strike because it has a wider area, and if you have large family, you can hit all 4 of your dummies at once and trigger oiled mechanisms. Oiled mechanisms, though, in my mind, is one of the quickest boss melts you can have. If you have 4 Ace of Spades and the attack speed bonus, if you have family meeting and the attack speed bonus, and you have sharp noses, being able to proc more attacks from your dummies, giving them more chance for sharp noses with that boosted attack speed, you just completely shred bosses with this. It is insane.
I've seen stuff with that before. Like, oil mechanisms is interesting because I think you need the target to be distracted or stunned or something so that you can actually get all set up and go to town on it. But undeniably, if you have that window open, oil mechanisms can totally wreck a target. It's so fast. It's incredible.
I put it on low on my tier list kind of for that reason. I acknowledge it's insane for boss, but I think in general that playstyle is so slow because there's so many enemies that back away from you. Like, there's healers, there's spiders, there's all these things that you set up a dummy right next to them and you want to go to town with the oiled mechanisms, but after like your first or second hit, they're out of range and you now have to move again. And I think that playstyle is just way too slow.
Yeah, I agree. And going back briefly to the base kit, one of the interesting things for Geppetto is that he doesn't have iframes in his power or in his special, but he does have it on his defense. It's a 12-second cooldown, so it's a fairly long cooldown, but Geppetto kind of has a defensive build going into things that synergize with this, like Holy Grail tends to be pretty good. The uppercut, looking at this, it's a 3-second cooldown. It's a good bit of damage. There's a lot of good talents for it. Power seems to me like a really good Baylor's Eye synergy. I haven't personally experimented with that. It seems to me like it would be one of those that should really pop off.
I agree as well. You can trigger it with a vacuum capsule. And again, his power just being able to hit through so many enemies as once does go dummy stupid. Use it with magnetic hammer and large family and vacuum capsule. 1 power. That's probably, if you have 4 dummies out, magnetic hammer and flux capacitor and Baylor's Eye, that's probably one of the hardest hitting things in the game. I don't think it's harder hitting than like a Sword Jin, Jin's Might, Jin's Fury. I don't think it's harder hitting than that, but it might be one of the hardest hitting things in the game.
Yeah, I agree.